I think we'll get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Ronk Zakaria, and I'm an A&E doctor and TV presenter. I live in Hackney. I work in Hackney. I love Hackney. Hackney will not be able to get rid of me. And it's my pleasure to be here on our Ask Mayor Phil. Basically, it's Grill Phil, isn't it?
It is.
So there are some housekeeping rules. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand. You'll find that there's a mic associated with your chair. The first button, if you press it, it turns the mic on. You can speak into the mic. If you press it again, it turns the mic off. So that's the first button. Ignore any of the other colours. If you could say your pronouns, that would be great. Mine are they, them. If you can't, don't worry. Let's be respectful of each other. No discriminatory language, no talking over each other. I'm pretty sure it's going to get a bit heated, and that's fine. Clapping and clicking's okay. I might cut you off if you speak for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, just because we want to give everybody a chance to speak. And we're due to finish at 9 o'clock, and it is being filmed, so please be mindful. And anyone with first questions, or would you like Phil to have a chat first? Phil, go for it.
I think I was going to say hello, yes.
Yeah, yes, please.
Thanks everyone for coming tonight. This is the first time we've had a Mayor's Question Time in person since 2019. We were preparing for one literally in March 2020, and it was one of the first decisions to cancel something at the start of the pandemic. It was literally the week of that announcement. We did do an online one last year, but there's no substitute for being in this room, inviting residents into this room and holding me to account. And I think we're now on our third in-person question time. It is the first time we've had a non-binary chair, so that's fantastic. And I think the first time we've had a Hackney resident for a while as well, so that's really important. The mayoralty in Hackney is actually 20 years old today. So that is when my predecessor took office in 2002. I was only 22 then, and I didn't live in Hackney, and I wasn't part of that first wave. But I think it's really important when you have a position as powerful as Mayor of Hackney that you have moments like this to question and hold to account. It's not the only way. There's some in this room that I have met at protests, some TRA meetings, walkabouts, people that will have been engaged with me around casework, and it's our cabinet meeting and full council next week. There are public question time slots in both those meetings. So this room should be for you and really interactive. After council meetings, I also do something called Grill Phil Online, which is where we do a Twitter Q&A. But this is this sort of annual set piece moment, which is really important. Clearly, the country and the borough face a lot of challenges. Most of us will be only barely able to keep up with the announcements from the government today that are shaping the cost of living crisis that is enveloping us all. We've produced a new leaflet, some of which I hope you saw on the way in, which is about how the council can help with the cost of living crisis and that advice. We'll be constantly reiterating that as the government changes its approach, but also as we prepare for next year's budget and start investing more into our support funding going forward during this crisis. One of the things that I've seen as mayor over the last 6 years is half of the time that we've had austerity is real challenges for Hackney residents, real challenge for how the council operate. We've had to do more with less while investing for the future. We are in a truly toxic mix, though, now with inflation, interest rates, and potentially further austerity and cuts, far worse than I think we saw even at the start of austerity. And that brings with it challenges for residents, businesses, community organisations, the NHS, and the council. It can feel a very depressing time as well. And we will have to make difficult decisions, but there's also about how we think and plan for the future together, continue to invest in what makes the borough special, whether that's investing in the humans of Hackney and recognising their diversity and celebrating where they come from, or investing in the physical infrastructure of the borough, preparing for net zero, building new council houses, and all of the things that I'm really proud of. But all of the things many of us want to do, I can't emphasise enough just how much harder they are to do. In 1 year, seeing the cost of building a new council house going up nearly 30 to 40%, changes radically the dynamics of building it. That's just one example. I'm really looking forward to your questions. Hopefully we'll touch on some of these issues as we go through the evening. There's also members of my office and casework team downstairs that hopefully you met on the way in, and myself and them will be available at the end if you've got individual inquiries that you want to take up that you wouldn't want necessarily to be broadcast on YouTube. And I appreciate people will have things that they might take, a certain way in a public meeting that they might want to then follow up, and that's why they're available. But really looking forward to having an open debate and questions. So thank you.
Right, so we can open the floor now.
Good evening, Mayor Carnival. Good evening, everyone. Dalston Kingston.
Sorry to interrupt. Would you just press the first button so your mic is on? Fabulous. And will you introduce yourself and your name?
Mr. Halla from Ridley Road Market. Good evening, Mayor Carnival. Good evening, everyone. Dalston Kingston train station is the main way for the visitors to come and shop in Ridley Road Market, and is shut most of the Saturdays. I was going to ask you if it's possible to contact the TfL. I know it's runs by the TfL, but Saturdays is for us, it was the main day, and now it's really slowing down because no visitors come in, and basically the bus replacements is not like they're not coming the right times, and then sometimes they park in Dalston Junction station. That was my question, because the last time I contacted you regarding the barriers on the Kingston High Street, and basically that was very helpful when you contacted TfL, they remove all of them. Thank you very much.
Did everybody hear that question? It was basically about, just to summarise and correct me if I'm wrong, Dalston Kingston Station is overground, and it's a major kind of thoroughfare into Dalston where people who work on Ridley Road Market, especially on Saturdays, where people come and spend their money. And our colleague is saying that it's normally closed at the weekend, bus services aren't sufficient, parking in the wrong place, poor signage. What are you going to do about that, or what can you do about that?
Thanks for the question.
And thank
you. Dalston's obviously really important. 2 stations, really important for buses walking as well to the market. And I know what we got removed were the blue streetscape expansions that came during COVID, but actually they stopped people crossing Kingston Road. And while you've got some really good crossings there, there's obviously a lot of informal crossing and access. And I think at the time we were like, why do we still need those? It's the first time this has been brought to my attention. So my primary role as mayor would be taking that up with TfL about the operation of the replacement buses, but also thinking about what staff and advertising that we have, that the market is still open, that there are other ways of getting to the market, and can we ensure that TfL are making clear that those other ways work. Clearly, if the buses are backing up, if they're going to the wrong place, that's really, really frustrating. I also saw personally during the rail strikes, buses were terminating early, the 277 wasn't operating, so it felt like we were going a bit backwards in Dalston in terms of public transport, but really keen to work with you and the traders to make sure that we get the transport links that we obviously deserve, and that the overground is really important to residents and visitors to the market, and it's our signature market, isn't it, in the borough? And I know you as a trader do a huge amount to publicise the market and give it energy as one of the stall holders right at the Kingsland End.
Thank you. If you press the button again, it will turn your mic off. Does anybody have a question? Press the first button, and thank you. Name, pronouns if you can, and the question. Thank you. The first one with the hands, not the coloured one. Oh, right. Yes, that's it. Yeah, the coloured ones are for voting. Yeah, that's it. Well done.
Okay. Thank you. I've actually written it down, so just to get myself clear on what I'm asking here is, with government plans to halve the amount of residual waste going to incineration in England by 2042, and with technologies to recycle black bin waste available and much, much cheaper, how can we justify the building of a new incinerator at Edmonton? Also, given the potential additional costs of emissions being included in the UK's emission trading scheme, the undermining of Hackney's zero carbon targets and already poor recycling rates, and also continuing to pollute the air of a largely poor and minority ethnic community.
Great question. And what was your name, sorry?
Sorry, Nick Lee.
Hi, Nick.
Hiya.
So that's a question in regards to a new incinerator being made in Edmonton or Tottenham, did you say? Edmonton. And how does that align with our zero emissions, I guess, policy? Yeah.
Really good question, Nick, and I know it's a question that's been debated out in the community, at the North London Waste Authority decision-making around the incinerator, and indeed there have been questions here at Cabinet and full Council. And I'll go back to some of the things that I've said before about why we need the incinerator and why it completely does align with our own net zero commitments and our work to increase recycling. And these things aren't either or. Fundamental to London's waste strategy and the Mayor's strategy over this Mayor and previous ones is not to see London exporting its waste and dealing with the waste where possible in a circular economy, in a recycling economy within the M25. I'm really committed that we don't see Hackney's residual waste, the black bag waste, being shipped around, increasing its carbon footprint and making sure it's dealt with within the North London Waste Authority. We've been talking about upgrading the incinerator at Edmonton, I think, for over a decade, actually delivering a cleaner, more modern facility for local residents and for the waste authorities is incredibly important. It often breaks as it is now. It's not up to modern emission standards. It's going to sit within an eco park that allows us to do more of the recycling and reusing work before stuff enters the final waste stream. All that is possible under the new incinerator model, and we will also get energy from waste from that facility. And in terms of particulate matters, how we capture carbon in the future, how we constantly invest in modernising that, having that facility owned by the councils in the public sector, cleaner and greener for local residents near the incinerator, but also providing that service is why we took the decision to take forward the incineration. We will still be committed to reducing the use of waste that produce, driving up recycling standards in Hackney. It's one of the reasons at the start of last year we took the decision to introduce fortnightly waste collection to encourage more people to use our weekly recycling service and our food recycling. We're developing a circular economy strategy which will look at all of those opportunities to upgrade how we use waste materials and actually reducing that waste in the first place. But I don't think there was a sort of pause and review campaign which would not deliver a new facility. We've put a huge amount of effort in driving up our recycling targets here in Hackney, but we've still got a long, long way to go. My biggest fear with doing nothing was kicking the can down the road, leaving a facility that's reaching the end of its life and frankly letting down local residents and taxpayers, and actually taking the decision to have that public facility and taking forward was the decision that we took, and I stand by it. And I think we can still get to net zero, we can still get to a more circular economy, reduce our waste, increase recycling, and use that energy from waste facility. And there are dividends coming from the electricity that we sell from that burnt waste that are coming now with the existing facility, but there will also be a energy network attached to it that will heat large parts of Enfield and I hope parts of Hackney in the future as well.
Does that answer some of your... Of course. Press the button.
Firstly, I would say that if all means of recycling was effective, including mechanical biological treatment, of black bin waste, all mixed waste, that could all be done without incineration within the M25, and then the actual residual material that could be incinerated would be minimal and could then be taken to an incinerator outside of London where it would not affect such a community. As I say, largely poor and minority ethnic community that has been suffering for decades with the current incinerator. Okay, the new incinerator will be cleaner, but it's also proposed to be bigger. When such residual waste is proposed to be going down, that doesn't make sense. Plus, if that, as I say, if that what could be the residual waste after all the treatment that could be done to it, then it could be taken out of London where it wouldn't affect such communities.
I do think all of those considerations have been considered not only here in the decisions that we've taken, but also by the Waste Authority that ultimately is the London boroughs in the NLWA, and future-proofing what we do with the waste before we consider whether or not it can be recycled, reused, or ultimately going into the incinerator is part of the long-term plan for the North London Waste Authority, as well as improving carbon capture and making sure it has the very best filtration. Keeping the waste and dealing with the waste close to where it's produced, I think, is incredibly important. We don't want to be exporting that anywhere. We want to make sure that what comes out of the chimneys is clean, and that is good for residents here, but also as Hackney residents, we can look them in the eye if we're in Edmonton in this debate and discussion. I know there's a different range of views on it, but that's the decision we, I think, rightly took. And I also think that the work that organisation wants to do to constantly improve and innovate how that building is used, using the very latest technology, having the end-to-end control within a public body also allows us to adapt and change if we do increase waste and decrease waste and increase recycling during the lifetime of that facility. I know there's been a debate about whether if we, as a North London waste group of boroughs, do meet our recycling targets, and then it's largely do we then draw in commercial and other waste. And I think the NLWA are really cognizant of that and not making sure that we produce waste to fuel it, because that would be obviously absurd when we want to drive down waste and increase recycling.
Just for my understanding, what does zero net waste mean?
So net zero target,
yeah.
So that is the to get to a point where we're not producing as a borough more carbon than we should. We're at carbon neutral. So all of the functions of the local authority, where it gets its energy, where it procures the waste that we produce, and you have different phases of emissions. So there are things the council directly controls. So the electricity that is here in this building is from renewable sources. That's a direct thing we control. When we move through our functions, you start moving to human behaviours, and those emissions are consumption-based emissions. So that are the sorts of things everyone in this room can help shape. The council can provide the infrastructure, making recycling easier, looking at how we can reuse, how we structure our borough, how we decide to dispose of our waste and recycling, but it is also how we buy our food. Do we waste our food? Do we locally compost it? Do we use our blue bins? And all of that. So when we talk about net zero, we start with the bits of the emissions that we control as council, and we're aiming to, we'll be in consultation about getting that as close to 2030 as possible.
So how close are we to net zero?
We've seen about a 40% reduction in carbon emissions over the last decade in Hackney. But when you look at consumption-based emissions, and that's how we travel around, what we buy, how we travel, including international air travel, there is a danger that the UK has outsourced some of that to obviously manufacturing abroad. So you have to look at where all of the things we produce come from, how we can, do we wear our clothes longer, do we repair them, do we, all of that is counted within net zero as getting there as a country. The country has 2050 as a target. We've always been more ambitious than that. The Mayor of London has 2030. When I talk about 2030, I'm thinking about the aspects the council directly controls, getting our fleet, so all of our vans and buses to net zero by 2030 would be an aim that I would have. But if we think about how we heat our homes and the number of gas boilers that are out there in private and public ownership in Hackney, transitioning all of that to a net zero option is going to take time. The other aspect about net zero, when anyone talks about it, whether it's the Prime Minister, is you do get to a point where you can't reduce emissions any further, and then you're talking about offsetting those emissions. And that can be by carbon credits, it can be about planting trees and infrastructure, but we want to have a really honest discussion with the borough through our climate action plan, which we'll be consulting on this autumn, is as close to getting to our own net zero as possible, so we don't rely on planting trees and trading carbon credits and those sorts of things. We are actually making those decisions to be a more resilient and sustainable borough in all of that we do. It's why we took the decision to move to renewable electricity a couple of years ago, moving from 50 to 100%, but we still rely on gas when it comes to our boilers, and getting to either biogas or transitioning away from gas is obviously really important. It's part of the cost of living crisis. Decoupling our energy costs from the international gas and petroleum market, also massively important in terms of energy security and the challenges that we've seen in very volatile energy markets.
So speaking on energy, I had a question in my DMs about electricity, cost of living, energy prices this winter, and people were scared.
Yeah, I think they have every right to be scared. And the cost of living crisis, how people pay their bills, and the inconsistency, I think, of the government around support. So we hear that average £2,500 energy price that's going to be frozen. Well, that's an average, and yet people have been saying, well, where will I sit within that average? Electricity alone isn't the challenge. It's often dual fuel billing. There's no consideration really on size of household, whether someone's a private renter and doesn't have control over the energy system that they use, or whether their home's insulated. All of those challenges, I think, in a borough like Hackney, which is a predominantly rental population, not an owner-occupier, and even owner-occupiers can't necessarily make the decisions they would want to about solar panels, more insulation, and all of that. So we've been campaigning resolutely on making sure that there's government support. One of the first things I did to the new Prime Minister was write to her. It feels like it was only yesterday, it was a month ago, a lot's happened since. And there were lots of people in this borough not included in the current protections around energy. So the £150 council tax rebate that people got if they were in bands A to D, which was part of the government's response, relied on people being council taxpayer.
Exactly.
So if you live in supported accommodation, hostel accommodation, you aren't necessarily always a council taxpayer, so you wouldn't have been eligible. There was that cut-off at band D. And then people talk about the credit that is going to be attached to people's bills and that's going to space out the cost of energy over the next couple of years. You have to be a bill payer to get access to that support. And if you're on a communal energy system, again, if you're in supported housing, if you're in hostel accommodation, you don't pay the bill, you don't get that support, but you also don't get the energy cap, and neither does your landlord. So there's real inconsistencies, and there's people in temporary accommodation, people in supported housing. The YMCA contacted me that they as landlords weren't eligible for that support, and there hasn't been the cash payment to those residents in some cases as well. So picking out the idiosyncrasies in that support and saying, actually, there's a whole range of people here. And if you're in communal energy, it's an unregulated market, it's not subject to price cap. Sometimes you get landlords that negotiate really good deals, but actually we've got to be really honest about the type of debate. The one thing we were doing, but we've paused it at the moment while we wait to see what the government support is providing energy advice alongside the Mayor of London, but we were also through the CAB providing vouchers for people that were facing challenges around energy bills. So people could contact the council through here to help. We'd refer to the CAB, who were processing it as part of an advice network, and they were providing onwards.
Is that still happening?
Vouchers. It's paused at the moment because the government's come in and stepped up support, and also the funding that we were using was partly government funding, and until very recently we weren't confident that that support was going to be back in place. So that's something we're going to be looking at again during the course of the next couple of months. But even those vouchers, we were talking about, you know, £20, £25, £30. When you're seeing bills of thousands of pounds, it was to support people through immediate crisis. There's no local scheme that could be putting £1,000 from the council, even with government support, out into local residents.
So there's going to be a lot of people in debt this winter, in energy debt?
I think even with the two types of price cap, we've seen today, I think that is going to end next year, rather than being 18 months, which is what was the original announcement that the Prime Minister made. I'm really fearful. That's why we produced the Help at Hand guide. And we've got to also recognise that even with the price cap, energy costs are only part of a mix, and people are seeing the cost of energy in things they buy. Businesses, up until that announcement from the Prime Minister, were not getting any support. I remember going to a cafe in Wells Street that was saying that not only was the cost of cooking oil going up, but energy going up 3-4 times. And then that impacts on residents when they go to the cafe and things like that. So all of those things. We're going to be developing warm hubs this winter out of community buildings, whether that's libraries, leisure centres, community halls.
Just go there
come
to keep
there.
warm.
They know that the council's paying, and then we hope to wrap around support there. But that shouldn't be necessary in the sixth largest economy on earth.
Doesn't feel great.
Notwithstanding Ukraine and all of those things.
We've got loads of hands.
Loads of hands going up, so let's bring in more people.
So just let everybody see that there's this guide, a guide to support available for Hackney residents during the cost of living crisis. So these are free, available here.
Yeah, and online as well.
And online. So I'm just going to go over this side a bit more. Press the first button, your name and your question, please.
I'm a resident of Hackney. I live in Stamford Hill, and it's kind of twofold. I just want to respond to what you've just said about the heating and fuel. What will happen to people who are on key meters? So if they can't afford to put money on their key or their electric, is that it? They're in the dark, they're in the cold? So that's one question, but maybe you can answer that. The other thing is as a resident of Stamford Hill, I know there's a plan for regeneration in that area. And I've contacted the council numerous times to say that nobody knows about this. And I have a huge reach in the community, especially the black community. And one young lad came to me the other day and he said, Asda's closed. But how? Why? I think Sainsbury's is going to be next. Morrison's is going to be next. So then I was on the newsletter and I saw this lovely picture of you, Phil, saying, hey, do you want to do, have you got an idea for an activity or something in the clock tower building that's being sold? So I contacted, not you, but whatever email it was, and I got a response 2 days later saying, yeah, once it's been sold, you'll be told of the prices. I'm like, but Phil didn't say that, you know? And it's those kind of things. I'm a founder of an organisation called Carib Eats, and you know, the conversations I'm having with the community, especially around that area, is why is the council not consulting everybody about that? And when I have asked, and they've got back to me maybe 2-3 months later, what I've been told is then we've had consultations in local libraries and outside Sainsbury's, and I'm saying that's not good enough. Not good enough for a young black lad who's not probably going to go to a library to hear a consultation. So yeah, thank you.
What was your name, sorry?
My name's Ali.
Thank you. So 2 questions there. One, that was about people who have key meters and key energy meters, and how are they going to credit those meters with this energy crisis? And number 2, it seems as though some poor communication or miscommunication with local residents in Stamford Hill in regards to regeneration. Very little communication. Over to you.
So first point on key meters, my understanding of the national scheme is it does support people that are paying by key meters. There's always been, though, an unfairness on tariffs that we've campaigned on here before. It was one of the reasons we wanted an energy company, because of the unfairness around key meters. In the end, we didn't pursue our energy company in that way, but you got a much higher tariff on key meters than you did when you could shop around and use direct debit, and I think that's fundamentally unfair. I think the government has moved a bit.
Discrimination.
It is discrimination, and people that are budgeting, people that are paying back debt shouldn't be caught up in that.
Exactly.
And I think it's a disgraceful part of our energy system. The voucher system was eligible for anyone coming through that advice support, and I think designed for people that needed to top up, and that's why I want to review and make sure that we have something this winter to offer in a similar way. But the inequity is a national change that we need to see, and actually the unit cost of energy in a market should not still be impacting on the most vulnerable. In the guide, and I don't want to read the guide to you, each energy company also has its own sort of vulnerable energy user scheme. And I think for people that are at home contacting their energy company, having that option as well as turning to the council and some of the government support, I found some schemes in there when we were putting that together that I hadn't heard of, that can help support people in that situation. But
these people, sorry to interrupt, are often people that are budgeting and perhaps don't have a phone where they can just call. Maybe it's pay as you go, maybe they've run out of money and they don't have any credits. Where can they find a phone to phone these people?
Good question. I think,
do you know what I mean? Because it's energy and
absolutely.
Technology poverty is real.
We're going to be using our libraries and the service centre to support people around this. So I would say come to the council.
Yes.
We can get people online. We have people at service centre that do that. We have people in the libraries. People that were struggling with data and credit, we also have a voucher system around that. Now, I don't want people to have to come to the council, get a £10 voucher just to ring their energy company to do that. So what I will take back is whether we can provide some free phone locations
That'd be great,
at set times to see if people can contact their energy companies as well.
So I was part of an organisation that were giving out the fuel vouchers, and so they came, we filled out a form on their behalf, and then they took it to a pay point, and the pay point weren't accepting them. 2 councillors came down to my day job, just asking some questions, and we told them about that. And they told me that an officer had gone themselves to test that, and she had to go to 4 different places. So that system's really not working, so I think that just really needs to be looked at. I think it was working when it was with the CAB, but then you had to get an appointment with the CAB. So this system seemed easier, but if somebody's gone to a shop, a pay point, and what they're saying is, and I don't blame them, is saying that they're not getting that money. It's taking them a month to get that money.
And they need it now.
Yeah, so they're saying there's a cap.
Why are they not getting? So why are the pay points not giving the money?
Because it takes them. They have to wait a month to get the money.
Right.
So they're just saying, I'm capping it, and I understand that. But if you've got somebody who's got to go to numerous pay points, it's not working.
Yep, I'll take that. That's the first time I've sort of heard.
Thank
And
you.
I know you're part of the food network, aren't you, with Carib Eats? So if we do take forward a new scheme, I think we'd be talking to people in our food network as others and other voluntary sector organisations. On Stamford Hill, I think there's several things going on here, and I'd be interested to know what you mean by the regeneration. I'll start with Asda. I found out about Asda by their public affairs company getting in contact with me and saying we want to close Asda. My first initial reaction was to write back to them and say don't close Asda. 2 reasons, it's an affordable supermarket. 3 reasons, affordable supermarket, the staff, and what are you going to do with the building?
Sorry to interrupt, why did they want to close Asda?
Commercial decision from their property team to close the Asda.
So it was purely just for the...
Yeah, there's
capital.
no regen plan for that site. The council hasn't master planned it. We haven't gone and said we want a different type of town centre with Asda or anything like that. Asda literally have made a commercial decision to exit that site, and then obviously the support shops that are at the entrance. And that's not something I wanted to see. I was really surprised there wasn't a bigger campaign to sort of save Asda. Perhaps I could have led that campaign, but actually I just wanted to get in there. And my deputy mayor for planning and regeneration has now, or is about to meet with Asda to try and understand what they want to do on the site. Because I think if they'd wanted to talk to us about making the supermarket work better, we would have done that. You know, there's loads of things that we do with many supermarkets in the borough and relationships that we have. and that again, I wouldn't want to see Asda lost.
No.
I wouldn't want to see Sainsbury's lost. I wouldn't want to see Morrison's lost.
No.
I know Ollie's here from Save Morning Lane. I don't want to see a Tesco's
Tesco.
lost there. These supermarkets are really important. They are commercial business decisions. There are a few exceptions where the council owns the building. But then we're trying to keep those supermarkets in place, those affordable supermarkets. And our regen team are talking and have been in discussions about expanding Lidl's and Aldi, and it was really good to see Aldi come to Dalston during the pandemic. But these are sort of commercial decisions that are taken by Asda. Reduces competition though as well, which I think is not good in Stamford Hill. But we were doing a planning consultation about the future of Stamford Hill, which is led by a steering group. We've had about 5 years worth of meetings there. If there have been none with young people, then that is something we can still pick up, because we're nowhere near finishing that journey around updating that planning guidance. And that will look at the whole of Stamford Hill and the future of Stamford Hill. The sale of Clock House is a sort of separate process. So we used to have a neighbourhood office in Clock House where the housing service, 2 stories there, and then the flats above are all private flats. So it wasn't the only part of the building that was really in active council use was the ground floor. And rather than modernising the offices and investing in the offices and letting them out again or doing a regeneration ourselves, it was decided that the best solution was to dispose of the building and the freehold interest, and it's now out being marketed. But it was for a commercial receipt for that building. The reason for that is the council's involved in lots of complex regeneration all over the borough, and there is only a finite capacity in the council to deliver its own projects. And it was felt there with the complex ownership of the flats above, we don't have any nearby sites, that the best idea was to sell the site and invest that money in buildings elsewhere in the borough. There's things like Stoke Newington Library that are being refurbished, King's Hall, our own council house building
Having a couple
programme.
new GP practices.
The new GP practices, they need to be funded. What we're doing though is an open marketing of the site. We're very interested in anyone that wants to come forward and buy it, but it is a multi-million-pound receipt that we're looking there to invest in the capital infrastructure of the borough.
Any ideas, or why kind of pose it like that? Because it's not actually that, is it? When you put that, I don't know if it was a newsletter or there was a picture of you and you just said, anybody got any ideas about what we can do in the clock tower? That's not actually what you're saying.
Well, it was to get local people, businesses, organisations, housing associations to start thinking about what they could do with the site and seeing if it's bought by somebody from Hackney that understands.
But that's not going to happen, is it?
Well, it may do. There are housing associations, there are community organisations that are looking for a long-term basis. There may be businesses that want to use that space. Having that marketed at a local level in Hackney versus just sort of selling it behind the scenes, it felt really important to me that it was these very few occasions do the council actually sell assets. The council's been about using our assets, using them for the community, letting them out for the community, even in the case of Dalston, entering new commercial arrangements to bring former private assets into the public sector. But when you've got a sort of disused housing office that needs a lot of capital investment, reluctantly took the decision that it was best to dispose of it. It is part of a set of buildings the council owns that are managed under a property portfolio that include things like Rose Lippman Community Centre, Chats Palace, the Pedro Club, Unviet on Enfield Road, Hackney Chinese. It's a portfolio that we need to invest in and make sure that we bring those buildings back into use. And the GPs are a good case in point. You know, disused buildings and bringing them back forward for the community. That requires capital expenditure, and so that is why we've decided to dispose of Clock House.
Although I do think our friend is saying that, I think you're saying that you feel as though it was advertised that you would perhaps have an input, and it feels as though that didn't happen. And I think that's what she's saying. But
I'd love to forward the email, though, to see what the officers said back, because I can improve on that. That isn't the only way we want to make community space accessible to Hackney residents, though. So
I'm going to stop you, just because we've got other people, and then I'll come back to you. Someone had their hand up over here. You, madam. Please say your name. Press the. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Antonia, and I live in Homerton. And I have a question in connection to the point that was raised before about heating and recycling. So, when referring to the Green Homes programme, Hackney encouraged people who own or rent their homes privately to insulate their buildings. But there are still estates owned by Hackney that are not insulated and lose over 35% of their heat through their walls and single glazed windows, leaving tenants and leaseholders with problems of condensations and unnecessary high bills due to heat loss. What is the Mayor planning to do about this, and by when? And regarding window replacement, will the Council consider avoiding PVC in favour of long-lasting alternatives, which, unlike plastic, do not harm the environment and are more robust and at long term have proven to be considerably more economic solutions?
That's a great question. So that's a question in regards to sustainable installation in houses in Hackney. This lady's saying that there's a high percentage of buildings that still have single glazed, insufficiently insulated. What are you going to do?
Yeah, thank you. A really important question, and it links back to getting to net zero. You don't have to answer the question, but I'm interested in what estate you're on. Priory Court. Which is here on Brooksby's Walk. So behind Homerton Library?
Yes, just behind.
Yep, behind Homerton Library. So that's good context, because I don't think that had decent homes work under the last set of renewal. So we have invested, if you go back 10, 15 years, there was the Decent Homes programme funded by the last Labour government, and there were various installation programmes funded by the last Labour government and the coalition government. And we always sought to use those funds to insulate and modernise our buildings, and in some cases do some quite substantial retrofit, which is the sort of term that's used at the moment. So the best example you can see visibly in Hackney are the Gascoigne Points blocks at the start of Wick Road, where we did external wall insulation, removed a very carbon and expensive electric-based heating system, created a communal heating system, modernised kitchens and bathrooms, did the roof, did the windows, whole envelope, and cut bills from 3,000 to, I think, at that point, it went down to 500.
How long did that take, sorry?
It took about, I think it took over a year to do the work.
Okay. Were people still in the property?
And people were still in the property.
Fine.
Yeah, the decision was to do it in the property. So I'm using that as an example because to get to net zero, we're going to have to retrofit all of our council blocks, whether they were done during Decent Homes or whether they're still waiting for that investment. And I lead for London councils our retrofit action plan for London, an award-winning programme which aims to get us to net zero by 2030. The missing bit is the funding mechanism to do it. We have some of our own resources, and we're going to be coming forward with a retrofit pilot/pathfinder this autumn, which will take an estate, a sort of average Hackney estate that we'd all recognise that was built in the mid to late 20th century, and we're going to fully upgrade it to EPC-B, hopefully, if not higher. That, on the stats that I've seen, will take about 80 to 90,000 a home to get to that level of modernisation. And we are responsible for a stock of around 32,000 homes. So not all of them will cost that much. Some of them will have been modernised. Some of them will have different types of system. So all I'm saying, to cut a long story short, is this is a mammoth task. We want to prove the concept in Hackney, working with residents this winter, going into the start of next year. And then we're constantly making the case to government that the best way to create jobs, embed green skills in our communities, get to net zero, deal with the cost of living crisis, is a proper national funding for a retrofit programme. It's what you saw, without getting party political, coming out of Labour Party conference. It's sort of at the heart of the manifesto is retrofitting. We are also looking at how we can use blended private finance, so some government money, some private money, possibly a contribution from those residents that can afford to pay and the council to get there. But I'm really conscious that tenants don't want to be experimented on, leaseholders don't want big charges, and there's a sort of fairness and equity here. And you also need to do a whole block at a time. So there'll be private renters in there, there'll be owner-occupiers, there'll be vulnerable tenants. If you go down a street in Hackney, you're going to find everyone. We need to make sure there's equity built into this work. But there is no financial solution yet, even with the government is going to be announcing what's called public decarbonisation funding this autumn, assuming it doesn't get cut by the Chancellor or the Prime Minister. Their basis on how much it costs to get to net zero and retrofit is 15,000 a home. So even if we got 15,000 per every Hackney home that we're responsible for, and that's only the council stock, not housing associations, not private stock.
But what does that include, though? So are we changing windows, improving boilers and insulating? What does...
Everything. It's fabric first.
But why does everything have to happen? Why can't these people just have double glazed windows? Like, I know that's not in itself enough, but why does it have to be one big thing in one big go?
We do have a cyclical maintenance programme that was sort of paused during COVID, that we have to restart, that would replace those components. But there is a cost to the scaffolding, there's a cost to the disruption, it's not either or, but I think there are dangers of going out there doing big projects that then 5 years later we have to come back and do the retrofit. But I don't want people to have, and there are people I know that are waiting for windows that have already been approved or waiting for a new roof that's already been approved. Those capital programmes, we need to get them back on site and delivering those interim measures. But they still have a cost, and I don't know if you were promised windows and what year you were promised them, because I'm not sitting in front of my asset management plan, but...
Since we moved into this estate 7 years ago, we've been asking simply for repair, not even replacement, a repair which is the duty of the freeholder. So we as leaseholders, we're going to pay the bill, and we are making sure that we pay our bills, but we feel that the freeholder is not complying with their responsibilities, which is even the basic of maintaining the windows, which are now rotten, and we have even water coming to our flats, ruining our property. But we cannot, apart from the energy, which is the big issue, windows are literally falling apart. So I think the second step, I do understand that we've been told that, this is happening and funds we're looking for funds, but I would like to follow up.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up.
Because it has to be seen to believe the state these windows are, and we do believe that it's not fair for us to having to then pay the bill for major works when the freeholder hasn't been compliant with their duties.
And that does come to your UPVC window dilemma. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of design for windows,
but that's
there
a
are
great
some
point.
challenges.
I think there's going to be chats between you two later. Thank you. Please.
Hackney Council has...
What's your name, sorry?
David.
Nice to meet you, David.
Thank you. Hackney Council proposed a public space protection order for Wick Woodland, Hackney Marshes, and the surrounding area. This would give officers increased powers and discretion to harass residents, including people experiencing homelessness. Can you guarantee to us tonight that if this PSPO goes into effect, not a single person experiencing homelessness will be fined for seeking shelter in those areas, and that officers will not use these powers to prosecute or remove individuals seeking shelter?
That's a great question. I didn't hear quite clearly about this policy. What was the policy that David was talking about that would mean that officers would have increased powers to move on people without homes?
So there are certain areas in the East of the Borough in Hackney Wick which we've designated public safety protection orders, and
Public
that's
safety protection orders.
Wick Woodlands, I think Mabley Green, part of the marshes, and that was in response to parties and antisocial behaviour in those spaces.
But what does that mean? What does this...
It gives us an enhanced set of powers to stop unlicensed music events, stop people drinking in those areas, stop people lighting fires, moving on collections of people that might do that. We have always said, and if I come out of the PSPOs of 2017, which we consulted on, Google it, we never consider homelessness antisocial behaviour. Fundamental, absolutely fundamental. So the act of being homeless in the public realm, even if it's sleeping in bin chambers, it could be sleeping in our parks, it could be sleeping in the areas surrounding or within the the PSPO, the act of being homeless is not committing antisocial behaviour. So breaking that link very clearly between antisocial behaviours and the act of being homeless is fundamental to how we support homeless people in the borough, and what we do around the homelessness prevention duties, but also making sure we don't use enforcement powers against homeless people, that we have a multidisciplinary team, mental health team, street outreach, and making sure all of that is in place and supporting people off the streets, whatever that street setting might be, wherever they might be bedding down. Now, I know there were some vehicles underneath the A12 that were parked, I think, on TfL land or Canal and Riverside Trust land. It doesn't necessarily mean that if there were people in those vehicles and those vehicles were parked illegally, that I can guarantee that ourselves or our partners won't try and move people on if they're part of a broader set of antisocial behaviour. But putting a tent next to the Lee and being homeless, our response wouldn't be immediately to enforce against the tent or the vehicle. I know there were some complaints around underneath the flyover, and as I said, some of the parties and antisocial behaviours and noise in these different settings, and that's why we consulted not just once, but we had a pilot PSPO in Wick Woodland, and then we extended that to some of those other public spaces in that area. So I'm reluctant saying cast iron guarantee if homelessness is linked to something else. But it would never be not our intention, there or anyone else, to treat homelessness as an antisocial behaviour.
I think one of the things that we see in Hackney is that homelessness often can come hand in hand with being drunk, or perhaps having a mental illness that's visible for folk to see. And I think it can be difficult to see that some people who live without homes are moved on, not really thinking about that their actual display of behaviour is probably related to the fact that they don't have somewhere to live. So it's kind of tied, isn't it? Speaking on homelessness, I have a question from Carla, who runs Outsiders. It's an LGBTQI youth housing association or refuge, and she's put, why have they recommissioned the only LGBTQI youth housing in Hackney to a non-LGBTQI plus organisation?
That's the first I've heard of that, I'm afraid. I don't know is the answer to that question.
Okay, right, that will
So
go on YouTube, and I'm sure she will,
I will take
or
that.
they will contact you.
I know that we worked with Albert Kennedy Trust around supported housing, but I think that site in Hackney came from them, wasn't commissioned by us. I don't know where if there's other facilities. I know we provide housing advice through Stonewall, and we were commissioning some specialist support. And I don't know why that would not be from a provider that's led by LGBTQ plus people.
I'll ask them to message you privately. Yeah. Okay, who's next? I'm going to go straight ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trish. I live in a Victorian house with my partner, who is he's got severe spinal problems. He had several spinal surgeries. I have a 10-year-old autistic and ADHD daughter. My partner is also on dialysis. He's waiting for transplant. Yet we live in a first floor, one-bedroom flat. We've been trying to get reassessed for our banding to be upgraded. We've waited for 8 years. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. We've had several surveyors. We live right next door to Hackney Downs line. Our house shakes so much that all the nails from floorboards are coming up, ripping our feet. Increasing mould, which I have to do myself, clean it myself. We've been asking for several surveyors. We had 2 in the last 10 years saying, oh, this is not fit for human habitation. Every time we tried to get some support with that, we had problems saying that the system, due to the cyber attack system, is offline, which happened over 2 years ago. Last communication I had was the email saying that the fact the system is done won't impact our chances of getting a house and getting rehoused. Now my partner can't walk up the stairs. He needs to sit on the stairs several times to get to the first floor. We both sleep in the living room while our daughter has got the bedroom. So the living room is our dining room, it's our family room, it's my partner's hospital bed. He's incontinent, and all of this is happening in front of my daughter. Now, what can you tell me about the system being put back on and finally some reassessment to be done?
That's a really, thank you for your question, and thank you for being so vulnerable as well. I think when it comes to personal and quite individual questions like this, we're going to take it off camera. Is that okay? And then we can make an arrangement for you to chat to Phil. Is that okay? So thank you very much for being vulnerable. That wouldn't have been easy, unless you have something to add.
Just more generally, because I
Yeah.
don't know the specific case with the details kind of in front of me, and really welcome what you said about taking it offline, but that isn't moving the issue
No, yeah, please,
offline.
no. Yeah.
And the cyber attack and the impact it's had on our housing register has been really significant. And for those people that are seeking a change in circumstances, providing us with more information about deteriorating conditions, new household members, worsening health, being able to update their records with us, be assessed, and then get increased bidding has been on pause for now nearly 2 years. It's 2 years, October 2020. The systems that underpin all of that have now been restored. The work we're now doing is reconciling people that have provided information to us and getting those cases and that backlog process, but also being able to have a front door where people that are coming to us for the first time can process their claims. That work is going to take this autumn, winter. But I'd want to, in the context of where you sit within that, then I think we're getting into the personal details. Yeah. But it has taken a long time to rebuild the system, get back the data, get stability, allow council officers to have access to it, and then starting to work through those backlogs. And that goes to the nature of the cyber attack.
Speaking of the nature of the cyber attack, as a doctor working at Homerton Hospital, it has been incredibly hard to get information about vulnerable young people, adults, etc., out of hours because of the cyber attack. Now, I heard through the grapevine that the cyber attack was caused by external evil forces who wanted money. Are you able to tell us a bit more about not the truth, but what was this cyber attack? Because I don't think any of us here actually, we just told cyber attack. What was it?
It was a sophisticated criminal attack on the organisation.
Yes.
Which happened exactly. Well, we don't know exactly by whom, and there's still an ongoing criminal investigation, etc., etc. So there's a limit to the legals.
How did it happen?
Well, there's a limit to
what
that.
Information has been lost then?
So separate out the two things. There is loss of data
And is that now exposed and vulnerable to other...
And then there is the loss of data that we have access to. In terms of the theft and the risk to personal data
Yes.
of both staff and residents and businesses, that was very limited indeed.
Okay.
And when that information was published, we contacted the individuals who had their data published
Okay.
through a triage process of how
Okay.
vulnerable the individual and the data. So if you've never been contacted by us, then your personal data that would have put you at risk hasn't been published somewhere. That was the commitment we made. That, though, doesn't mean we had access to those records. And the way those criminal organisations work is by basically sealing that data off from you and taking the backups off organisations, and then effectively asking for money to get that data back. We obviously aren't going to pay. You know, that would just encourage more attacks on public sector organisations. And we've seen, you know, health systems, schools, I think some hospital trusts, other organisations. In the US, you had the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. Different organisations approach that in different ways. What we've been doing ever since is looking at rebuilding our data, recovering that data. It's sort of forensic cyber work to rebuild our systems, rebuild our platforms, and get those services up and running. In the intervening time, we've also been using interim tools to keep children safe, to keep adults safe, to work with our partners, to collect information, to process benefits claims, and make sure that it has minimal disruption on people's lives as it can do.
It's been pretty scary, though.
It has been very disruptive.
Yep.
It's hit trust in the council.
Yep.
It's had financial impacts. It's, you know, very difficult if you're, you know, vulnerable contacting the council for that information. And I don't, you know, I've apologised, I think, last year at a similar setting. You know, the impact on individuals and the organisation has been substantial, and the financial impact on the council as well as that personal impact on vulnerable people.
But the thing I take out of this now is that we're over the hump.
Oh, more than over the hump.
Okay.
If you go service by service, you know, there was a time when we couldn't do land charges. There was a time when we couldn't process council tax changes. There was a time when we had to stop test and trace. You know, test and trace came back first because it was a new thing we were doing. And slowly but surely, we've been rebuilding all of those services.
So that sounds positive.
The latest updates are always with the service pages on the council's website, and in individual conversations.
Just before I come to you, can I come to you, sir? The first button, not the red or yellow, just the first one on your right-hand side. That's it. Thank you.
My name is Nathan. I was going to ask, what's been done to reduce or tackle antisocial behaviour? And is the council, some council members, are they letting things slide? Do they see antisocial behaviour and just move their face to the other side instead of tackling it?
That's a great question, Nathan. I wanted to just pinpoint what you mean by antisocial behaviour, though. What in particular are you asking Philip about? Because that's quite a generalisation. And...
Well, I live in Manor House, and if there are a lot of people behaving badly, really, both kids and adults, you know.
In what sense? What are you saying? Because behaving badly to me might be different from you, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's antisocial or warrants any sort of like government or policing.
Selling drugs, drug dealing, people who got nothing to do with the area, they're always in the area, you know, and
thank you.
There's so many things, you know.
So Manor House, antisocial behaviour, drugs.
So my challenge is I've met Nathan, and I've done some casework for Nathan, and I reviewed that before this evening, and I know that you're still having some of those issues and they aren't resolved. So it's a bit like the personal case.
Is it?
It's quite hard to go into the personal case, and anything I say about how we're structured, how we work in partnership with the police and residents can feel very distant if you're living like Nathan and still facing those challenges. I would say and this is where I'm not talking about an individual case, but how we invest as a council, we're really committed to our community safety partnerships and our work with the police, our role as landlord, other housing associations, working with the community to reduce and tackle antisocial behaviour. And that is notwithstanding some of the challenges around the police and the relationship and trust and confidence. We have an ASB team within our housing service.
What does that mean, sorry?
Antisocial behaviour team that work for Hackney Housing.
Yep.
Run
by whom? The police or?
This is council officers.
It's council
that's
officers,
a civil.
okay.
It's a civil response, and that's often basically through some aspects of civil protection, but also using things like the tenancy and the lease to act in support of residents that are victims of antisocial behaviour and abuse. They sit within housing, but they also work in partnership with the community safety team. And that's a team in the council that works with the police, the Integrated Gangs Unit, CCTV, and our visible council enforcement service, which looks a bit like a parking wardens or the police, but they're civil enforcement officers, and they can enforce some of the civil penalties and monitor as well and act as expert witnesses. So there's a full set of services that we deploy to support and reduce antisocial behaviour and work in partnership with the police. Again, they involve, a mediation first and look at mental health first, and that sort of response. And again, they can sometimes get involved in very complex cases. I didn't come back to your point about sort of street drinking, substance misuse. Again, they work with public health colleagues, they work with adult social services to try and come up with a plan that reduces the disruption to the community, but also protects the individual and supports the individual to get better.
We don't want to criminalise everybody, and we don't want to criminalise people for the circumstances of their existence, which we might not know about. I just want to
But I also know it's a very difficult situation that Nathan and his family is going through, and I don't want to take away from that. And I would commit to going back and making sure that we get that right. And the last response I sent, I didn't feel was good enough.
I would like to segue onto the Hackney Carnival, because I don't know if anyone wanted to ask anything about it. I think we were all really disappointed when Hackney Carnival was cancelled. It feels like it has been cancelled and not postponed this year. Could you speak more on that and more on the decision and what is or has been done for people who invested lots of money into the event and now feel out of pocket?
So a lot in there, simple question.
Sorry, but it's Hackney Carnival.
A lot in
Umbrella.
there. Umbrella. So,
and you've got 4 minutes or 5 minutes because there's more people that want to...
Yeah, I'll work with that. Not a flippant response, a really difficult response that the council had to take within about 24 hours going into that weekend when the Queen died. The recommendation, the decision we took was to cancel the carnival on the Sunday because we're in a period of national mourning. I don't take that lightly as one of the biggest fans of carnival going. It's in both manifestos.
So important to the borough.
It's huge when you look at the research that we've done around businesses and young people and sense of place, and is this a community that represents us? And we effectively fund Carnival close to £1 million when we put it on as a council. So it's a huge financial commitment from the council. That £1 million isn't just spent on the day, it's all of that infrastructure and work with carnival groups and the preparing. So not taken lightly. The first instinct, though, was to see if it could be rearranged for a following kind of weekend while it was still decent weather. And the team reviewed that with carnival groups, with all of our suppliers. So you think about security industry, the coordination, the people that provide the infrastructure for carnival and keep people safe. And regrettably, that sort of infrastructure for an event of that size is often booked up very much in advance. And so we weren't able to find a suitable way of taking that forward this year. What we've put in place is a series, and it's over the next couple of weeks, a series of events related to Carnival and supporting Carnival. So for the Carnival groups themselves, they will have a showcase at Shoreditch Town Hall, which replaces the awards night. So they'll be able to showcase everything that they were going to produce for the street, be judged by the judges, appear before a live audience. It will be filmed and live streamed. So all of that effort and work that went into those productions can be seen and championed. There will then be some work beyond that with young people around half term and carnival groups. There'll be a live stream of some of the sound systems work and some of the work that was being produced there as well.
Did you want to ask something about the carnival?
And then so anyone that we were contractually obliged to, we paid.
Got it, okay.
So the challenge was for businesses that didn't have a direct relationship with the council, the limits to what we could compensate for. If people were going to be doing food, drink, sales in and around Carnival, the offer was not only a refund of the pitch fee, but an opportunity to take a pitch on any of our street markets over that Carnival weekend. Because obviously if you've got fresh produce, you want to go out and sell it, it will go off. And so that was put in place. People chose Chatsworth, Hoxton, Dalston Market, and going in there. And then going forward it's how do we safeguard a carnival for the future, and that is really important to me. But I can't guarantee whether carnival will be back next year or whether it be the year after.
Oh,
or
really?
some
Why
sort of
would
comment.
it not be back next year?
Because of the logistical challenges of organising it and the cost and that sort of thing.
Does the community know that? Because I think
we're
everybody...
working with people to sort of work out what's the best solution. We don't want, we haven't had a carnival on our streets since 2019, and I'm really worried about what that sort of says if we don't have it. I'm also want to ensure that there's something next spring out on the street. We had a Dalston Children's Carnival a couple of years running. I'd like to do that so that we've got something out there for the community right now within this carnival season.
Are we having a public consultation about that, though? Because
there will be engagement.
Yeah, there will be engagement. I'm just going to go to this lady first, and then you're next. I'm so sorry. Would somebody help? Just the first, but you got it. Fabulous. She's got
Sorry,
it.
and I shouldn't just turn towards Dr. Rollins. There's people here.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
My name is Janet Tower.
Hi,
I've
Janet.
been living in Hackney for 40 years. And I've never seen so much changes in Hackney. And two things I want to talk about is the road closures. Everything have been closed off. Everything have been piled on to Graham Road. There's thousands of people living on Graham Road, and they are getting all the fumes from the car. Number one. Number two is buildings that is locked up in Hackney and not being used. What are you doing as the mayor? What are you doing about
Can you name some buildings? I'd like to think about the context you're talking about.
There's one in particular that I will name. It's on Shrubland Road.
What was it previously?
The something tabernacle.
The church?
That's the one, yes. It's been locked up there now for over 3 years.
Not the Tin Church.
The Tin Chapel,
The
yes,
Tin
that's
Chapel,
the one.
yeah. So I did meet with the owners of the Tin Chapel, the church, just before the pandemic, about their plans to restore/reopen the church. And I think there was an active church community in the church at that point.
That building is nearly 200 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was built specifically as a church building. And it's been locked up there now for nearly 4 years.
So they're not using it at all?
No one is using it.
Do you have plans? It sounds like you want it to be used for something.
Yes.
Back to a church or something
Yes,
else?
Definitely.
Okay.
So that's a conversation. Your pseudo ward councillors behind you and Deputy Mayor Bramble. I think it's the right side of London Fields, or it might be just into Haggerston.
It is. I think it's Haggerston, but that's fine.
We'll have a discussion with you about that, and maybe I can pick up the thread with the church community that was speaking to me about it, because there was I think they came to my advice surgery, and it was the challenges around preservation, heritage, getting the building back into
200
use.
years is a long time.
It's really, really important building, and almost unique, I think, as a church building, in the area. So the powers I have as mayor, the powers the council have, is the buildings we own and operate, and then putting pressure, and sometimes there are powers we can use to bring empty properties back into use, but they are quite complicated and not easy to deploy, especially if the landlord isn't doing something active with the space. So where someone, you know, has a community building that they're trying to sell and demolish, you can make it an asset community value, which stops the transfer. You can use compulsory purchase. There's community rights to acquire. They are all quite complicated. What they normally do, though, is once you start that process, is nudge the owner to come and talk to the council and the community to bring forward a building. So what I can do is work with the council about what we know. I can contact who owns the building and see what we can do to
and make it a church again.
Move it as a church again. But it will be in some form of private ownership, and that's my. Does the previous church sitting on a building, thinking I own this building in London Fields? What am I? You know, whether they're going to bring it back as a church, or they've got some other plan for it. But I think it's locally listed. I seem to recall, so I don't think it can be anything other than its church.
Cool.
It cannot be anything other than a church. It's an A1 listed building.
Yeah.
And it's owned by a family.
Is it really?
For a considerable amount of time. So there's been lots of conversations about the use, and I think you're right. When we had the pandemic, that sort of put everything back. But I'm happy to work with you and the mayor to see what we can do. We don't own it, but every power of influence that we have to have that conversation with the owners, we're happy to do.
Can we just park road closures for a second and come back to that? I just want this lady's and then this gentleman, and then we'll come back to road closures. Thank you. But we are. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, she, her. Just to come back to Carnival, and I didn't really get a sense of you how you made the decision. My concern was it is the best interest, cancelling Carnival, of most people in Hackney. And I think often I have a problem about who is this run for? Who is Hackney run for? And I think that picks up on various things other people have said. The lady down there talking about the supposed consultation on the use of the building, and you did talk about public assets. But and also just while I've got the floor, and then I will shut up, it is to also say to you, I always have concerns. Why are we all so frightened of the word regeneration? Perhaps because we know what it means. Why not go back to call it development? Regeneration has become a slippery word, hasn't it? And it fills people with fear. You know, those of us who've been in Hackney for 30 or 40 years, and probably those who've been here for 6 months. So, but basically the Carnival question, which to me is about, was it in the best interests of most people? And you had said you had committed quite a lot of money.
That's a great question, because I spoke to lots of people on that Carnival weekend, and everybody said, why couldn't we just have like a 3-4 minute silence and carry on and dedicate the Carnival to the Queen? I mean, as controversial as that sounds, it would have meant that the Carnival continues, but yet perhaps we could say it was continuing in her name. It really didn't feel like it was a decision with Hackney residents at heart. And I believe you when you say, sorry, I don't want to be, I'm trying not to be mean, I'm meant to be impartial, but I live here and I love it here. I just missed that Carnival.
100% missed it too.
Yeah.
I was planning to be there the whole day.
And so many people lost
money.
money.
And so many people were.
So many people lost money.
Carnival starts in a very controlled way, and there's elements of Carnival that are much more controlled by the council. The parade element, the judging, the young people, the family event, and then we sit alongside that and enable what happens, like the sound systems, the amazing parties that take place in the community. The last one when we had the sound systems at Tesco, but we've seen it at Ridley Road. I think when you're considering what the representation of all of that looks like, can you keep quiet dignity and still have Carnival go ahead in a way that we would all recognise? And do you do damage to views of Carnival in the community if we had Carnival as we all know and love it? And that was a really difficult. You are in a period of national mourning, and we are a public body. It isn't a separate event, and I know private parties took place. I know commercial events still took place. But if you look across events organised by public bodies, they erred on the side of caution and largely cancelled or repurposed.
Caution of what, though? And I'm not trying to be annoying. I'm just
Look,
caution
Carnival
of what?
has at its heart mourning. You know, there are Carnival,
Yeah.
you know, where we've seen, you know, slavery, Windrush,
Yeah.
all represented within Carnival. And I know within Carnival traditions, some of that is completely possible.
Yeah.
But I also know that people, it's very easy to judge and twist
Yeah.
what that looks like to the outside world.
Would it have been personal to you? Is that not?
No. I think it's personal to the council
Okay.
and Hackney. And that day is D+2.
What does that mean?
So the day the Queen dies is defined as D.
Wow.
In the national policy,
Yeah.
that date is designated, and then everything flows from that within London Bridge, which is the plan for the monarch's death. If the Queen dies late in the day, which the Queen's announcement of her death was late on Thursday, D becomes the next day.
Okay.
And then you get the series of proclamations, first from St James's Palace,
Right.
then from the City of London, and then all local authorities follow suit on the third day. Effectively, that was the Sunday.
Got it.
So we had the duality of Carnival and our duties around proclamation. And I saw the Twitter debate. We could have done all of it in the Town Hall Square, and maybe we could have done, but I think there was quite a fear of the people that were logistically involved in all of it, getting the right tone, recognising national mourning, and I'm willing to believe we got that wrong, but that was the call not just myself had to make, but Cabinet, the Chief Executive, the council officers that support this whole event to take place.
I think moving forward, and if whatever happens with Charles, I think there does need to be a discussion in regards to the relevance of having, like, I agree the Queen needed to be mourned, but 10 days and then like things to be cancelled because we're afraid of being seen to not be doing the right thing feels difficult now in this present climate. Do you get what I mean? I don't want to disrespect a monarch, but I also am not sure that disappointing a whole borough, many people, because we're worried about the optics, it didn't.
But it's not about worried about the optics.
Is it
if you
not?
look at the
Okay.
discussion on social media, it was really mixed. Some people said it was the right call. Other people said it wasn't. Maybe you could have had a version of Carnival. Maybe you could have postponed it to the following weekend. There were all of that in the dynamics of it. And I think when you sit here and the people that advise and support, there was never going to be a right decision.
No.
Go ahead and you're being disrespectful. Go ahead and you're stop it and you're letting everyone down and it's not taking place. And those are the dilemma. That was not a singular decision at all from me, but I obviously did take part in it and was really nervous about the questions about what support a Carnival group's going to have, what's our communication, how are we talking with people. The debate about the monarchy and its relevance in a borough like Hackney is linked but separate. And in the way that I spoke about the Queen, the monarchy, its relevance, Hackney's radical Republican tradition, in this room at St John Hackney, they're not, I'm not a Republican, but I represent a borough that I reckon if you polled it, probably has some of the highest Republican values anywhere in the country. You know, we saw that European referendum, we saw that in the ARE referendum. This is a home to a very international and radical place. We're really proud of that radical history.
Proud.
And dissenters are literally the people that built this borough. They're who are buried at Abney, they're people that prayed in nonconformist, they're trade unionists, they're anti-racist and marchers. All of that really does matter to me and is also reflected in the Carnival tradition itself, you know, resistance as well as celebration. So all of that is there.
It just doesn't matter.
It does matter. It does matter. And that's why I'm determined to safeguard Carnival and make sure it comes back.
So let's have a Carnival next year. Can we? I know
I
that
can't
sounds
promise
I
that
don't want
right
to be
now.
Fiona Bruce and be like, can you tell me next year? But I think our Hackney community deserves to celebrate itself and also to have Carnival next year. And we just need to make that happen. Can we?
I can't commit to that right now.
I tried, peeps. Right, you'll go. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Luke from Clapton, and I know we said we didn't want to discuss road closures.
Oh no, I did not. That I didn't want to discuss. I wanted to move on to another point.
Yeah.
But floor's yours.
I don't want to discuss road closures. I'd like to discuss roads being open, and then being open to cyclists, to pedestrians, and to drivers, and to primarily local residents here at Hackney. And I think a great example of where that's not the case right now is the Stoke Newington gyratory, where the A10 runs a northbound one way, which works really well for people who don't live in Hackney, drivers who are going to further off boroughs or even outside of London. And I think we need roads for drivers, of course, and we also need those roads to work for cyclists and pedestrians and for local businesses. And if the gyratory was improved as per previous plans that have been circulated, it would really help us here in Hackney. So, I've read those plans with enthusiasm a few years ago, and I know TfL has been under severe funding pressure, but I'm wondering if there's an update, and whether there is or not, what you can do as mayor and what Hackney can do as a council to kind of improve that gyratory.
Would you be able to sum up the question for the camera? Because I didn't hear all of it.
Yeah, so the question was around the Stoke Newington gyratory, which is the one-way system that means that the A10 going north is one way, and then the traffic, buses, cyclists, road users coming south on Rectory Road come the other way. And it's part of a design of urban infrastructure that it's effectively create urban motorways across the borough. You see it in the Old Wick Road leading to the A12. You used to see it in the Triangle in Old Street when I first moved to the borough. And it encourages community severance, higher speeds, and it's really impermeable for lots of vulnerable transport users, and I think it's entirely inappropriate for our major town centre of Stoke Newington, one of our major town centres. I think I've stood in every single election, even when I was a Hoxton councillor, as part of a group of people committed to removing the Stoke Newington gyratory, and it would have come very swiftly after some of the other roads that I've mentioned that we have sorted out. The council and TfL got that as close to delivery that I've ever seen it, with a large consultation on a really detailed design that had an eye on what the streetscape would look like afterwards, where business parking would be, where all of the things that would make it work would sit. And then we went into the pandemic and then the TfL funding crisis. And it's, I think, broadly a 15 to 20 million pound scheme in its totality, which might seem a lot, but actually there's a lot of complex moving parts, and to get a high quality scheme. It is, while the government and TfL now have a deal, the funding for that isn't in the current announcements for active travel and healthy streets, either from the council or TfL. I've met with residents along with Council Coban and Ward Council, especially that live on Rectory Road, and cycling south in the dark on Rectory Road is one of the most frightening experiences that any of us could choose to make. And every time I do it, I think I won't do it again, and then I do it again. So I live it as well, and it isn't great for walking. It's not great for the bus routes. If you're on Church Street and you want to go south, you've got to walk all the way down across and round. So that community severance is real. The discussions that I've had with TfL are what can we do about speed right now? We need to do this major capital project. We need to keep supporting it. We need to find the money to do it at City Hall and here. And that's going to take a lot of hard work. But how do we humanise Rectory Road in the meantime? So that is, and we will have it, I think, by the end of the year, down to 20 mile an hour with a degree of enforcement, both community and, I think, hard enforcement and signage, and looking at the planting and crossings and things to reduce speed all the way along Rectory. That would humanise that road. It means that people that are going backwards and forwards to Stoke Newington Town Centre across some of those cycle and walking routes would feel that that has happened, but doesn't do away with the idea of ultimately restoring both roads to humans in all their forms, and making sure that buses are supported, making sure car drivers, business access, all of the rest of it are there, and that's my long-term aspiration. But The good thing is TfL got a deal, and it's starting to be able to invest in these things again. But has it got the funding to actually do the full scheme? Not yet, no.
Sorry, I didn't realise you had your hand up. Please speak into the mic. Press the button and give us your name. Thank you.
I'm Pauline Flanagan. I live on the Wyke Estate, which runs onto Wick Road, the two-way road now. Basically, it's caused from Morning Lane onto the estate, a really bad rat run. We've had 4 car accidents.
Is that Flanders Way?
Yeah. I live right by there, so as they shoot round the corner, they've got humps there, but they say they're feasible, but they're not. We've had 4 car crashes. Like, literally, the cars have just taken the cars off the pavements. We've had to have the road repaired twice, because as you go out of the road, there's a big dip, and all the cars scrape it, and it's just big holes or whatever. They did say, Street Scene did say that, because there was a consultation, all the tenants said that they want that end of the road closed, so they can't. So they're doing it to beat the lights, basically. Yeah. So they said that it will get closed off. They've done a consultation, it was agreed, should have started in February. We're still waiting. We had the last consultation we had with them was an email to the Wyke Estate manager, and they basically said it's just taking longer, but no reason why. And before somebody actually gets killed, we'd like it sorted out.
100%.
And you've got 2 schools as well.
Yeah, and the Muga, the cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is.
I can't agree with you more. I don't have a detailed answer on that, but.
I mean, I've got an email here from them. I can show it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So you've been promised road closure and it hasn't happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is because people cut the lights.
Yeah, it's on an estate, so it's not actually a road.
It's an estate road.
Basically for residents to come on.
We do it from Wick Road as well going in, so we've had to repair all the pavements too.
Yeah.
I remember your big hole.
Yes.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. And we planted trees there, so in theory it should be nicer for everyone, but it's not.
It's not.
It's firmly not. I don't want to take away the point
we're coming back to Graham Road now.
About Graham Road.
Just that you had a positive outcome for your church, so I was like, let's get somebody else speaking. But over to you. Put your mic on, please. Thank you.
So the question was about road closures.
And Graham Road.
Yes. And Graham Road specifically. Yes. And the impact on main roads. And I know, Ollie's a campaigner on this, and others in the room might be as well. I know that people have felt an impact on Graham Road and other roads, and have talked about main roads and boundary roads and residential roads that don't matter. And I know they want to see action on those roads as well, and we're committed to action on those roads. My view is, though, that reopening roads that we have closed is not the answer to doing that. The answer is further investment in public transport, reducing the reliance on the private car, and looking at measures that can improve, in cases, the flow of some of those roads and their design, and their interaction with the rest of the road network. If you reopen all the roads again, you just create more demand for traffic and more people that drive.
What was the problem with Graham Road in particular?
So Graham Road's one of our east-west routes.
Yeah, I know what. Yeah. But what's wrong with
and so people talk a lot about closing Richmond Road and the impact on Graham Road. The series of closures that work all the way back from the A12 actually started in Frampton Park Estate. So you used to be able to drive from Essex Road all the way to the A12 through residential streets in Islington and Hackney, past numerous estates and households and schools. And the traffic in those roads was all backed up as well. It wasn't like a great relief valve. If you look at the traffic lights at Richmond, I remember the traffic going into Wells Street and cutting across to Wick Road and beyond. We've said and published data that show across the borough there was a 2% reduction in traffic with that. We're about to publish a new set of data around the impact on overall traffic flows through the borough. And I come back to the set of statistics that I've talked about a lot, but we're here tonight. 40% of all the traffic in Hackney has no social or economic value to this borough.
Really?
And it's people driving through this borough. Now, they may or may not have legitimate reasons to do that, and everyone will, we're always, I'm a car driver sometimes, we always drive through someone else's area, so it's not like pull up the drawbridge and declare Hackney closed, but 40%, and especially for some of the most deprived communities in the borough, we're getting all of that air pollution, all of that traffic congestion and safety impact, and we have a finite set of tools to reshape our streets in favour of people while still providing access to local residents, and we've deployed different things in different places. And it's why I support a fair road user charging system, because at the moment, perhaps without the fuel charges of the current cost of living crisis, it is often easier and cheaper for people to choose the car than it is public transport or alternatives. And we need to right that while protecting legitimate car journeys, disabled road users and other things. So where we listened to campaigners was there was lots of absurdities as we rolled out our road closures. So we still had the banned left turn from Richmond Road, for instance, the banned left and right turns on Queensbridge Road, and we didn't provide access for blue badge holders. So some of our feedback from talking to local residents was, actually, this is a road with buses on it, it's a C road. If we allow blue badge access, if we sort out some of those turnings, we'll improve access for local residents, we'll provide for disabled people in the borough more options, and we'll roll that out on Richmond, and that relieves some of the pressure on Graham Road and other roads. But the ultimate answer is working collectively as a community to drive less.
Which is not easy.
And it's not easy, and people are very attached to their cars. We've also, so the sets of data we regularly publish are traffic movement, air pollution, bus times, walking and cycling data, and we're constantly going to update that, and the next set of data will show, I think, that these measures are working even on main roads.
Because when I look at Richmond Road, I live almost at the end of Eleanor Road. My doctor is up Richmond Road, Manfred Road. And if I want to get to my doctor and I get a cab, the cab have to go onto Graham Road and drive all the way up to the end of Graham Road, turn left, up Queensbridge Road, then turn on to Richmond Road.
So the idea of all road closures, and they're not completely closed, as you've said, there's still access around, is to reduce the attractiveness of trips by car below 1.5 to 2 miles. So I forget the exact percentage of UK car journeys that are under 2 miles, but that is the bit that causes the most congestion, has the impact on public health and community. And so making it a little bit harder to do those very short trips reduces traffic and reduces private motor use. And the idea isn't to stop you being able to get to your GP by taxi or getting a lift there, but there are people taking trips that they could be taking by walking, cycling, or public transport they're currently taking by car. We don't have a perfect set of tools and powers, but what was happening before we made any interventions was ever more private car ownership, ever bigger cars. The cars were getting bigger, pollution and more trips taken by car. And I suppose as a political administration, meeting our net zero targets and our air pollution targets, but also thinking about what are our streets for, how do we want to live in them, and do communities perform better when people are using public transport, walking and cycling, was taking that decision. But it was not to do it at the expense of disabled people or people that needed access. And what you'll see in our parking policy that we're about, and I can't give the specifics because it's not public yet, but we'll be prioritising disabled people in that parking system as well. So blue badge and parking together will actually improve the mobility of disabled people in the borough and their options for parking and access to shops and businesses and their facilities together.
When do we look forward to that?
I think it's in the next couple of weeks.
So 2 weeks.
Next couple of weeks.
I'm going to shift you onto this gentleman there,
Yep.
sorry. You know how to use it.
I don't at all. The good lady there just explained that she's not a car driver, but occasionally she needs to get a taxi to get to appointments. What this has done then is inconvenienced somebody who's not a car driver, who is in need of the use of a car occasionally, perhaps due to disability or whatever. And what has happened is then you have basically then increased the inequality because, to benefit some people at the expense of those people who are already suffering the most as a result of it. Graham Road is a terrible road it is now, from the people that I've spoken to, a terrible road to live on. And there are several others in this borough that are terrible roads to live on. These were already the roads that were the poorest occasionally, with residents from minorities in them. And actually what's happened is that lots of the traffic has been now pushed onto those. There's no light at the end of the tunnel for those people. We don't know when this traffic is gonna die down, because it's like, right, at some point we're going to discourage people from driving. I don't know anybody in Hackney who's given up their car. It isn't happening. It's not evaporating. Lots of this was done on the premise that there was a rise in car journeys in London, in billions of miles of journeys in London. That premise has now been seen from the latest Department for Transport data to be false. There's been no rise in millions of miles in London, and actually what's happening now is an increase in inequality for lots of people in Hackney, and it tends to be the poorest and those people from minority groups. And when is there going to be some sort of action on that for those people? Because, like, who is it for? Who is it for?
That's a really good question, and I just wanted, before Phil answers, I just wanted to be clear that sometimes markers and factors and variables aren't things that we can just see. So people will report that it's difficult for them to get to X, Y, Z, but what we can't sometimes quantify is the damage that air pollution has on minority folk. So the increase of respiratory diseases, the increase of COPD, the increase of asthma, allergy. I think the first person or child to be documented to have died because of air pollution was a young black girl. So I get it and I hear you. It feels so difficult that there's this nation of two different types of people, those who can afford to pay a bit more to travel a bit further or go round, and then folk like, I forgot your name, I'm going to call you Auntie, here, who has to get an Uber and pay a bit more to go down the road. It is...
Have you been polluted in the place that she lives in?
Absolutely, but I don't know if this is clear cut as saying that some people, I just don't know if it's that clear. I know,
we all know
the health inequalities.
We know where these things are happening.
Yeah.
And I think, like, if we sort of, we could characterise it and say that actually this isn't happening to the poor, to the poorest and most deprived areas. But we know our borough. I've only ever lived in this borough.
It is happening.
But about 4 decades.
But none of the campaigners on this acknowledge Hoxton West, Frampton, the places where we've introduced LTN to protect the largest estates in our borough from that through traffic. That is what we have done. We haven't just protected Stoke Newington or London Fields or leafy parts of Clapton.
Church Street, you've got a closed road, for goodness sake.
I
mean, we know what Church Street is. We know that very well.
Yeah.
But Church Street's got a closed road. My road, just not so far from there, hasn't, and it's got 40%
But it is a whole package of interventions, from car-free development to using our CPZs in a clever way, to school streets, to investment in public transport, to cycle parking, to EV infrastructure, to supporting public transport, to supporting the ULEZ, to expanding the ULEZ, to campaigning for road user charging, for making LTN interventions. It is the whole package that is designed to reduce congestion, reduce air pollution, reduce car ownership, support public transport, and increase active travel options. If we just used LTNs, then that it could never lead to the types of changes that we're talking about, but we haven't. And LTNs have been in this borough before I was even born, never mind moved here. So they're things that have a direct link into community activism in this borough and improving the lives of local people. Whether it moved too fast, whether it could have been done in different ways, whether we got everything right, absolutely, hands up. I'm never, as a politician, going to say that we get everything right, even when we're doing what we think to be the right thing. But to not intervene on the side of people, to not make those changes, I think we do need to make those changes. And we've been really clear, I think, over a generation, standing on various election platforms, whether I've been in the driving seat or not, that we stand on the side of people-friendly streets and making those changes and interventions.
I think also it feels as though
with social justice.
In Hackney, where there's such a mix of different people with different privileges and living in different housing conditions, different jobs, etc., all so close together, it can feel as though when changes are made, that those who have the ability to make life better for minoritized folk choose not to. And I think that sometimes feels as though that is the bottom line. Before the people who have spoken, I want to, you had your hand up, press the button, say your name. We've only got 10 minutes left, so if we keep it quick, and I'll make him be quick, and I won't talk anymore, and we'll get more people in.
I'm Beth, she, her. Just wanted to raise Tesco Morning Lane plot, because that's been brought up a couple of times, but not raised specifically. I know that there has been talk about development partners, this kind of towards the end of the year. I'm wondering if there has been any development on that, and also is there a commitment to keeping Tesco as a superstore, because there was talk of it becoming a Tesco Metro. It is the only affordable supermarket in the area for Hackney Central. Most people cannot afford that posh new M&S. You know, if that Tesco goes, the community has nothing. It doesn't have affordable food. We've already spoken about Stamford Hill losing an Asda, and it's just everything that this community needs. So I'd like to know what the future of that plot is, please.
Great question. Save Tesco.
100% save Tesco or another affordable supermarket, because I've been out there campaigning to save Iceland in Hoxton, but it's been replaced by a Lidl. As a former resident of Hoxton Street, I'll let consumers be the judge of whether it's Iceland or Lidl. The situation there hasn't moved on yet. The critical thing for the council is to invest in the team that can take forward the development in-house, and then work with the community and partners to decide what it looks like next. I still contend, as I've said to campaigners before, Tesco dictated the size of store they wanted to bring back onto the site. If they want to reopen that discussion with the council and the community, I'm completely up for that, because I know how important that supermarket is. I used to live on Morning Lane.
What's the plan for it now, then?
Well, the old scheme's gone.
So what's that Tesco? Is that Tesco?
So Tesco, or the other point is, the Tesco would always remain open.
Right.
So 100% keeping it open.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next? Back to the drawing board. The drawing board is Tesco and a site that works for local residents, the community, the council.
But that works. The Tesco as it is right now works. We like that.
Yes.
Why do we need something else?
Because we bought it to regenerate our town centre.
So we're going to have more flats?
It will be, no, it will include flats,
yeah.
But actually this is the bone of contention about it being a town centre location. When Tesco brought forward, you didn't want me to speak a lot, but
I didn't, you got a minute.
When Tesco owned the site, it had a plan to build a Tesco Extra with private flats above it. Planning knocked that back in the council, and Tesco were going to bring forward the site to sell it.
Okay.
Rather than see Tesco sell that site to the highest bidder, the council bought the site.
Thank you.
For around £60 million. That's quite a lot for a supermarket and a car park.
But it's a really integral part of our community.
But it's absolutely integral,
yeah.
But it could also be better used to provide homes, jobs, a Tesco, new shops, new links through into our town centre.
Okay.
It used to be a street. It used to have a pet shop on it. I've met the former owner. She lives in Homerton. You know, that street has evolved, but what we've got at the moment is a car-based supermarket.
We do.
We need a big supermarket that serves our community, that has car access, but also provides homes and other jobs and opportunities, and generates a return to the council that we can spend on council services. And that's why we made the investment.
Rose, did you have a question? Shall I ask somebody else and then come back to you? Or are you all right? We've got 7 minutes. I'll come to you. Does anyone else, before I go to this lady, does anyone else have something to say who hasn't spoken before? This gentleman, go for it. Sorry. This gentleman, then Rose, then this, and then if we've got time. Go for it, sir.
Oh, yeah, thank you. This Saturday...
What's your name, sir?
My name is Jerry, and
Nice
I
to
come
meet you.
from Sanford and Shackwell TRA. This Saturday, we have a Community Awareness Day. I feel that listening to a lot of people tonight, we really got to start on a local level. And we're very happy that the Mayor came to visit our estate last year, walked around, and building on that, we've got a history of the estate in archive and in film this weekend. We also have a discovery trail where we'll bring younger people, particularly, and older, and around, and we'll show them the new things and the improvements that have been made. Because a lot of things have been taken for granted. Walls repaired, new gym, the allotment. We have a beautiful planter that's been done with mosaic. So again, to give people a sense of identity, give people a sense of belonging. So understanding where they come from, why they're here, and kind of building on also the COVID, where we were as a community, we outreach to more vulnerable people.
For time, what's your question to the Mayor? Sorry.
My Mayor is, well, I would like to just kind of acknowledge the kind of commitment that his team and the Mayor have done in supporting TRAs in local communities. And we're grateful for their assistance, and long may it continue.
Oh, thank you. That's nice that you've got a bit of positive feedback there.
There was another question that could have been asked, which
but
is
we're
more
not. No,
problematic,
he hasn't asked it. Rose, over to you. Press your button. Would you help Rose? Thank you.
It's about pressing the button. Yeah. So, Sister Space and Hackney Council had experiences, and to date.
Please tell everyone what Sister Space is. Sorry to interrupt.
Sister Space is a domestic abuse charity that work with black women going through domestic abuse and sexual abuse. And we live in Hackney, we work in Hackney, and we used to have a very good relationship with the mayor here and the councillors and everyone. So a few years back, there was a, I'll call it a dispute, even though that's not the name. But to date, there hasn't been any anything nice happening. Actually, it's still at the same level that it was. There was some not very nice things that the council did to Sister Space, and what I want to know is, are there going to be any amends? Are we going to get our rightful place in Hackney as a domestic abuse service?
Thank you, Rose. We had the honour of awarding Sister Space, which is an anti-domestic violence charity, a community award some years back for the amazing advocacy work they do for African heritage and Caribbean heritage people. And I think, I don't know the ins and outs, but there has been some, I would say, attrition between the council and Sister Space. And it would be great, because you are our central almost volunteer-led advocate charity in Hackney, and we are so grateful for your presence. We're also grateful, it would be great to know how we can build bridges. And I know that's not necessarily something that maybe needs to be done on the floor now, but...
There's no animosity from me towards Sister Space. It's an organisation that I visited both at its original premises, its premises in between. I know Rose and Ngozi. I know the work that they do. I know their broader network. It's incredibly important to the borough. I know also council officers, whether they work for the Domestic Abuse Intervention Service or whether they work in voluntary sector property or in commissioning, all value the work that Sister Space do, and that there is an open mind across all of those different services. So we've got a new violence against women and girls strategy going to Cabinet. There is a forum that sits around that. Sister Space has always been welcome. No, but Sister Space is always welcome.
What would you like, Rose?
And just on voluntary sector buildings, I talked about the types of buildings we own. The voluntary sector buildings that we have are always publicly advertised and then let in a transparent way. And if a building becomes available and Sister Space are interested in it, absolutely, they would be people that we'd want to talk to about that. We had an open process for the old building on 243 Clapton, and it's gone to another black-led organisation working on hostile environment advice, AFRIDAC, who are moving in there as we speak and going to offer advice services. So, and we work with, we would be absolutely willing to work with Sister Space again around space
but you
or
all
advocacy.
have never come to us, you all have never said anything, you all don't apologise, you all didn't even put us on your list, and the list goes on. But it's about how, as you said, how a bridge is going to be built. How are you all going to acknowledge some of the nastiness that happened during that time? It's all these kind of issues that I'm talking about.
I don't accept there was any nastiness on behalf of the council. I'm really sorry.
That's your thingy.
Put the mic on.
Just a solution. This is what we're talking about. Some solution as to that needs to be addressed from back then.
Rose and Mayor and Phil, I guess we're coming to the end, and I don't want things to. I don't know if we're going to take any more questions. I wonder, is there space for mediation with both parties, with external?
That's done already.
Has it been done? I'm not privy to everything, so I'm just wondering, because it really breaks a lot of our hearts to see that there is this disconnect between an amazing charity, but also the borough in which the charity
all of those
set.
parts of the council are still engaging, as far as I'm aware, with Sister Space in different guises, and everywhere we engage, people are able. If Sister Space invited me to their new premises, I would go.
Okay, so that's a positive. So I want to leave on a positive. So the positive is here, that you are going to invite Phil. Phil is going to come to Sister Space and speak with Rose and Ngozi, and there can be an external person that maybe could facilitate this. Is that something
I think you're volunteering.
Possibly I am. But is that something that we can actually have as a, can we? Because I am somebody that finds it really difficult to forgive and forget. But I really love you both, and I want synergy. And I think those who live in Hackney, black and brown survivors of domestic abuse, deserve a unity between you two. All right, I don't think we have any more time. I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to be Fiona Bruce here and say that we actually have come to, we've come to 9 o'clock. It doesn't matter. I'm so sorry. I've been told that I have to do that. Thank you so much, everybody, for allowing me to be your chair, listening to me. Thank you for coming. Thank you to Phil, and thank you, everybody, for your questions. And please note that you do have a surgery when?
Last Friday of the month.
And people can contact you on what?
All the office contact details, and there's Grill Phil, and I'll come out and visit. I could do walkabouts as I did with Jerry.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Flanders Way, but and that's obviously the guide that's really important about cost of living.
Excellent. And yes, and everything is on YouTube, so no one can forget anything.
No, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
I'm sorry, my lovely.